It's not often that the presidents of Ukraine and Russia agree on something, but if their South African counterpart is to be believed, they both have agreed to discuss an end to the conflict with an African leader's peace mission, separately, of course. The continent has a legitimate reason to seek an end to the war. It has greatly disrupted food supply chains in regions that were heavily reliant on Ukrainian wheat and grain. But there are concerns about the neutrality of the aspiring mediators, especially South Africa, a fellow BRICS member with historically close ties to Russia. Just weeks ago, the Ramaphosa government was accused of providing weapons to Moscow. So analysts are questioning why African nations are really attempting to position themselves as mediators.
In a surprise move, 6 African leaders say they will take part in a mission to mediate an end to the war in Ukraine. They represent Senegal, Uganda, Zambia, Congo-Brazzaville, Egypt and South Africa, whose president announced the initiative.
The 2 leaders that I had occasion to speak to, that is President Putin and President Zelensky, agreed that they would be willing to receive the mission of the African heads of states in both Moscow and Kyiv.
But the neutrality of some of these African countries, in particular South Africa, has been called into question because of their close ties with Russia. The US has accused South Africa of supporting Russia with arms. It says a Russian vessel, the Lady Ara, picked up weapons when it docked at a South African naval base in December. South Africa denies the accusations. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says only China has presented a plan and is now waiting for proposal from Africa and Brazil. For its part, Ukraine has also acknowledged the need to improve ties with Africa. Ukraine plans to open more embassies in Africa and hold a summit with leaders from the continent.
I believe that Ukraine really needs to take steps forward to meet the countries of the African continent. We didn't work well for many years. We didn't pay attention. I think it's a big mistake.
But if African nations have failed to jointly solve conflicts on the continent, like Ethiopia or Sudan, what hope do they have of making a difference in Ukraine?
In a situation of war, anyone who is attempting to stop the war should be given a chance. So if, because of their closeness to the Russians, African countries, South Africa particularly as a member of the BRICS group, if it can use its proximity to Russia to influence Russia to stop the war, then that would be welcome.
The Ukraine war has left many African countries at odds with each other at the United Nations. A majority chose to abstain from passing a resolution to condemn Russia's invasion. But the reason Africa needs to push for peace may be closer to home. The war has worsened food, fuel, and the cost of living crisis in many countries. Leaders are now thinking of the domestic benefits that peace in Ukraine could bring.
Peace efforts aside, the Russian and South African leaders are already scheduled to meet later this year. That's alongside India, China, and Brazil, the other 3 BRICS members, at a summit of the group hosted by South Africa. But Pretoria faces a diplomatic dilemma if the Russian leader actually attends the BRICS summit in Johannesburg in August, since the International Criminal Court has issued an arrest warrant against him for the war crime of abducting Ukrainian children en masse. He could, in theory, be arrested upon setting foot in South Africa. Now, the Kremlin spokesman says Moscow is still weighing up in what way it will be represented at the summit.
Russia thinks that development of this format of integration is very important. And Russia will take part in this summit on a proper level. We will fill you in on all the details later.
Well, South Africa's leading opposition party says it is taking legal action to force the government to arrest Vladimir Putin if he does indeed turn up for the BRICS summit. On Tuesday, the Democratic Alliance Party said it launched a court application to ensure the government detains the Russian leader and hands him over to the ICC. Here's part of their statement. If President Vladimir Putin arrives in South Africa to attend the BRICS summit and upon receipt of a request from the International Criminal Court to arrest Putin, the South African government must immediately detain and surrender President Putin to the ICC. One of the people behind this court application is the Democratic Alliance's Glynis Breitenbach. She's South Africa's Shadow Minister of Justice. Ms. Breitenbach, welcome to the day. The South African government has just granted diplomatic immunity to all participants of the BRICS summit. Is this an automatic don't go to jail card for Putin?
Good evening. Absolutely not. The diplomatic immunity extended to delegates for the BRICS summit is a mere formality. It does not include immunity for persons for whom there are warrants of arrest issued, and they have made it clear that it does not cover somebody like President Putin, who has an international warrant for his arrest. So if he comes, we will be obliged to arrest him, detain him, and hand him over.
Do you think that is going to happen, though?
I sincerely hope not. I hope he doesn't come. The obvious thing for our government to do would be to withdraw the invitation. But if he does come, if he insists on coming, then our government must make it clear to him that they will be obliged to meet their international obligations. They'll be obliged to give effect to the warrant of arrest from the International Criminal Court. They will have to detain him, and they will have to deliver him to the International Criminal Court. So if he comes at that risk.
But the members of the ruling party of the ANC have actually said that they will welcome him with open arms in the country. Why do they seem to be so keen to stay in Putin's good graces?
Well, our government has a historical connection with Russia. Pre-1994, a lot of support was given by Russia, and so there's a certain amount of residual loyalty there. Also, we're all members of the BRICS grouping, so there's not really anything wrong with having a diplomatic relationship with Russia. Why our government is fostering such a very cozy relationship with Russia is not clear and certainly not popular.
Mm-hmm. Rolling out the red carpet for a wanted war criminal, which looks very likely is going to happen come August, what consequences do you think that could have for South Africa?
Well, the reason why we've approached the court for a declaratory order in this matter is simply so that there can be no ambiguity about what our obligations are. So we're hoping that the court will issue an order that sets out precisely the steps to be taken if Putin does come. And those steps are quite clear and set out in the Rome Statute. We've also domesticated that law, so we're obliged in terms of South African law to give effect to the Rome Statute. If he comes and our government does not comply with its obligations, that could be disastrous for our country. We've already been grey-listed by the Financial Action Task Force, and it's going to take a huge amount of effort to lift that grey-listing. If we continue to cozy up to the Russians in the way that we've done in the recent past, then our AGOA status is at great risk. Economically, South Africa cannot afford to be kicked out of AGOA. It's a huge boon for our economy, and our government is playing a very dangerous game.
Now, your party is rallying for Putin to not come to South Africa. If he does come to South Africa, you want to see him arrested. How much public support do you have in that endeavor?
Well, we've just started this court action. I'm quite sure that overall we'll have significant public support, responsible citizens in South Africa do not want to welcome wanted criminals or wanted war criminals to South Africa. Certainly isn't the space we want to occupy. So I'm quite sure that by the time August comes, we will have very significant support. And if he does come, then we certainly do want South Africa to comply with its obligations in terms of the Rome Statute. We want him arrested, we want him detained, and we wanted him delivered to The Hague.
South Africa is trying to position itself as a mediator between the warring factions in Ukraine. Do you think this government is well placed to play such an important role in this conflict, or are they too close to the Russian leadership?
Well, you know, our president again today in Parliament told us that they intend to play this role of mediator. Our government does have a very cozy relationship with Russia, and they've taken what they call a non-partisan stance on the Ukraine conflict. But their non-partisan stand is belied by the fact that they continue to visit Russia. Our defense minister spends a lot of time visiting Russia. We've just played, for some obscure reason, we've just played war games with Russia and China in our coastal waters. So, you know, Ukraine may well view us as way too close to Russia to play a mediation role.
That was Glynis Breitenbach. She's a member of the South African Parliament and the Shadow Minister of Justice. Thank you for your time.